Thanks for coming, everybody. We appreciate you being here. I'm Mike Wyrick, and I'm the chair of the Linn Phoenix Club for this cycle. And I've been involved in the Linn Dems and the Phoenix Club for a long time, as most of you know. I'm not going to go over what the Phoenix Club does. I think most of you have heard that speech enough times you don't need to hear it again. I do want to stop. Just for Charles, I'll go through it all. No, I won't. All right, and then if you're not elected, raise your hand, because there's so many elected officials today. We've got State Senator Liz Mathis, who's also running for the House. Where'd she go? She'll be back. We know she's not far. We'll hit her up again at the end. Representative Art State. Okay. Representative Molly Donahue. We've got candidate for State Senate Bree Oxley. Council member Ashley Van Orney from the Cedar Rapids City Council. Cedar Rapids Community School District Board member Cindy Garlock. And Linn County Chair Brett Nellis. And that's not counting our speakers, right? So thanks to all of you for being here. We appreciate you taking the time out of your beautiful day to spend some time with us, listening to a little bit from our state leadership about the direction and future of the Democratic Party. I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our first speaker. So we're going to start with Representative Jennifer Konfrsy, who's the first woman to lead the Iowa House Democrats. She leads the only female majority caucus at the state capitol. Currently serving her second term in the Iowa House, she's an associate professor in Drake University School of Journalism and Mass Communication. She worked for 12 years at Iowa PBS. She has also provided strategic communication counsel to nonprofit, state, and corporate organizations during her career. She lives in Windsor Heights with her husband Lee and 2 children who are both in college, and I'd like you to all join me in welcoming our first speaker, Jennifer Konfrsy.
Put my mask off if I'm back here?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks for that boring introduction. I appreciate it. It's a lot. I'm sorry about that. I tried to shorten it down, but everybody wants to know I used to work in public television because, you should all give to your public television station as soon as possible. Thank you. And at 800-779-7000 is the number to call. And if you value this program, if you don't do it, who will, right, Nate? So, no, I did that for 12 years, including asking for money on TV every March. So I was the reason your Downton Abbey got interrupted. Sorry about that. But I'm thrilled to be here and happy to chat with you a little bit. The future of the Democratic Party in Iowa is a pretty daunting conversation because, as you all know, we were knocked down pretty hard in 2020. When I was first on the ballot, I first ran for office in 2016 after then Governor Branstad vetoed some extra funding for schools on the night before the 4th of July. I don't know if anybody remember that, but I got furious and was going to run for school board, and then realized that State House might be the place that could actually give the money to those districts so that we could make sure that they were well funded. So I did that. I decided to run in 2015, and in my district lived the House Majority Leader. And turns out that's a relatively expensive race to run. Turns out the Majority Leader doesn't like to lose his job, and so it was a pretty expensive race, and I lost by about 500 votes in 2016. And that was out of about 7,500 cast. So was never going to go again. That was the worst. Cried and cried. Donald Trump's the president. Everything's terrible. My daughter's 16. She thought Hillary was going to be president. We're out of politics forever. And then on, I don't know what day it was, but Art would know, when the collective bargaining argument came up in 2017 during session, when House Republicans and Senate Republicans gutted collective bargaining rights for Iowans, I was watching, because it turns out I wasn't away from politics after all. Turns out I was watching on my laptop at home, because that's the kind of party household I live in, and I was furious, because I had knocked on 13,000 doors when I ran for office, and not one person had mentioned to me that our collective bargaining system needed to be reformed. Not one person had said, let's take this away. My opponent ran $500,000 worth of ads against me. And not one of those ads said he was gonna gut collective bargaining and help businesses. So it was a bait and switch, right? And that's what made me really mad. So in March, I was ready to run again, March of 2017. So I got up off the mat and I ran. And then just a little story, just because it's fun, Molly, I'm just gonna tell this one. So then in right before the deadline for filing, my opponent, the majority leader, decided he was going to move to a different district and run again in a different district, which meant that he ran in a safe red district and then I won, and then we got to serve together, which was relatively awkward since it wasn't that pretty the first race. But what I learned was that there's value in getting up and trying again. And that's what Molly learned, and that's what so many of us have learned, is that there's value in not staying down when you get knocked down. So that's what my message to my caucus, that's my message to my colleagues, that's my message to you, is that it's time to get up off the mat. I keep saying we can learn the lessons from 2020 without living in 2020. We don't have to be there anymore. The 2021 legislative session was terrible. It was demoralizing, it was frustrating, and it was a disaster for Iowans. And it would be really easy to say, that's what it's going to be. But I'm from here. I grew up in Johnston, Iowa, and went to school there when it was a tiny little school, and went to college at Drake and love Iowa, and I'm not ready to give up. And I'm not ready to give up on this state, and I don't think we're a red state. In fact, I know we're not. I'm talking to people all across the state. Since I got this job in June, I've been traveling the state and talking to people. They don't like what's happening at the Capitol when they hear about it. Because what happens is Republicans are still playing the bait and switch, right? They're still doing the thing where they go out there and they're knocking on doors and they say, we're here to help childcare. We're here to take care of, we're going to give you low taxes and we're going to make sure that our water is clean. All evidence to the contrary when they get to the Capitol. It is a bait and switch. So I take it as my job over the next 15 months or so to make sure everybody knows what Republicans are doing at the Capitol. When they come forward and say they fixed childcare last session, did they fix childcare last session? You all got everything taken care of now? Everybody's good? Plenty of care providers, they're all being paid really well? No. When they say that they made property taxes lower, wait till you get your bill. You'll find out they increased them because they put more of the burden for mental health care on the state, and now counties have to pay more. So there are a lot of things that they say they've done that they haven't. And my job is to call them on it. So I'm going to do that. So I've been told a couple times that as the first woman leader, I don't know how to say this, but we're among friends, right? That I'm tough. Let's just say that. They ascribe me to some male body parts when they say that the first woman leader has muscles or whatever else they want to say. Okay. But it's true. I'm not going to back down. And they don't quite know what to do with this because the state we are too much at this fork in the road. We are at the fork in the road, and it is time to decide who we are as a state. Everybody said that was 2016. We went a little bit down the wrong path in 2016. Everybody said it was 2020, and things didn't work out the way they should. You all made a huge difference in 2020. You've elected this amazing delegation from Linn County that its reputation precedes it and follows it everywhere we go because we have so many great leaders from Linn County in the legislature, and now we have Eric Jardy too. So we have even more. He's a great example of not giving up, of getting up off the mat, right, and running again. He and I have a lot in common when it comes to that. So we know that even though 2020 was terrible, there were bright spots like Eric. And we know that things can get better if we continue to fight and continue to let people know what Republicans are doing. So that's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to go out, and when you all know, you're paying attention. You're like me sitting at home on a laptop watching the legislature, right? And you know that you're well represented in the legislature. Linn County is well represented, but lots of places aren't. And we have a job to let people know what is happening there. They think they get away with things in the middle of the night. They think that when they pass bills that say school districts can't make decisions about masks in their own communities at midnight, and then have a little party outside the governor's office around 12:30 when they're walking out of when we're all leaving the Capitol and they're dancing and getting ready to go in and do a show with the governor to sign the bill, we know that they don't think you notice. But we're making sure that they notice. Does anybody remember when fireworks became legal? Yeah. I don't know what it was like up here, but it was in 2017 after I had just decided to run, and my Facebook feed was filled with people furious about fireworks. People were furious because dogs hate them, PTSD for veterans, they're dangerous, they cause fires, etc. And everybody on Facebook was like, since when are fireworks legal? And I was like, as a communications professional, I was like, where were you? And I posted, since March, when your legislature legalized them. And then people started writing to Jake Chapman in the Senate. People started to writing to the people who authored the bills. And it was a connection that voters made between something they didn't like happening and the state legislature. So our job is to create fireworks moments for the next 15 months. When your kids can't wear masks at school or can't have a mandate, you need to make sure people know this was Republican legislators who did this. And they did it in the dark of night. When your property taxes go up, you tell your neighbors, you tell your cousins and family around the state, this is because of what Republican legislators did. When you don't know who's carrying a gun in any given room because no permits are required and no background checks were required, you let people know that if they're more scared than they used to be, that's because Republican legislators did this. We need to start creating those moments for people in their lives where they are, so that then when they have that moment, we draw that line and we tell them there's a different path, there's a different way. You all know how important it is to fund races, and we know that you did that and then some in 2020. You also know that it really was not a fun election night 2020. We were happy about Joe Biden, but a lot of other things went real wrong. You also know that we have to get up off the mat. You know that Iowa's worth investing in and Iowa's worth fighting for. And that's why you're still here on a lovely August afternoon. You haven't given up, you haven't stayed home, you're not still on the mat, you're ready to fight. So know this, when it comes to the Iowa legislature and the Iowa House Representatives specifically, you are represented by fighters. You are represented by your own community, by Molly and Art and Kirsten and Tracy. You're represented by people who care about this community. You also have a leader who's out there fighting every day to make sure Republicans get away with nothing. Because I'm one of those women leaders with muscles or whatever. Because this is more important than giving up. So 2020, we lived through it, we survived it, we're done with it. Okay? We've had 900,000 postmortems. We've all learned what we can from 2020 and we're applying it to 2021. And Ross will talk about some of the things that the party's doing to this, and I can talk about it too. But we now need to look forward. I'll end with the best line from my former boss, Tom Herkin, and our former senator, when he says that if you want to go backwards, put it in R. If you want to go forward, put it in D. So we're looking forward and we're ready to fight, and I'm so grateful that you're here with us. So thank you. I'll take questions after Ross, if that's okay. All right. Thanks, everybody.
That was really great, Jennifer. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sorry I made a little, maybe not so appropriate comment, but that's what I'm saying.
No. It's all good. Considering the crowd that you've got here, we want to let it all hang out and hear how you feel.
Good, all right.
I think we did.
Yeah,
so it's all good. All right, well, thank you for that. And then next up, Ross Wilburn is an Iowa State representative from Ames, and he's now the chair of the Iowa Democratic Party. A former mayor and city council member in Iowa City. He's long record of public service with a master's in social work. Ross has 32 years of experience in nonprofit, human services, educational, and government organizations, both locally and nationally. He currently lives in Ames and has 2 adult children. Please join me in welcoming Ross Wilburn.
Good morning, good afternoon, Linn County. So I'm Ross Wilburn, and it's great to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. I want to share kind of some of the nuts and bolts that are going on with the party, and I want to thank Leader Konfrsy for her leadership and her working with me as well as Leader Zach Walls in the Senate. I just came from the event that they had for his birthday down there, and I got to tell you, Democrats are putting it in D. Moving from neutral to D. My experience, I became the chair of the party at the end of January, and my theme for Democrats that I've been sharing around the state is let's start to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I never in my wildest dreams thought that I would be a county chair, let alone the chairperson of a political party. And with all the traveling and talking and events, which I love meeting people, but on top of being a representative, it is a lot of work, it's a lot of travel. And so I have to get comfortable with the uncomfortableness of the miles on the road. But as I've been doing that, I took a tour around northwest and southwest Iowa, and let me tell you, on a Sunday about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there were 3-4 counties worth of Democrats. By the time I got there, because I was one of the later speakers, there were about 60 Democrats. Northwest Iowa, Shelton, Iowa, and there were more. But the organizer, she told me she was disappointed because she wanted to get 100 and they fell short. I'm like, this is phenomenal. This is fantastic. And they were talking about getting organized. They had looked at the State Democratic Party webpage to look at the spot where you can find out, are you still registered or were you put on inactive by the horrible voter suppression bill that was put out. So they are starting to put the mechanics down there. The Democratic Women's Lunch Bunch in Sioux City, in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Kind of same thing as a woman women's group that meets. There were probably about 50, 60 Democratic women there. Again, the same thing with some of the labor partners down there. They not only have been trying to get people re-registered, but they've been working with each other and the Democratic Party, who partnered with Contest Every Race, to identify people to run for school board and city council. And some of the money, the stimulus funds that came to the counties, their county down there, they had a secret meeting to talk about where or if or how to spend that money. They caught wind of it, a couple of the chairs, and they had a presence there. And they forced them, just their presence and calling them out, to set a meeting, with proper open meetings notice. And so I see Democrats starting to put it into drive. That expression, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. In my spare time, I'm a group fitness instructor. And I'm going to assume there's some walkers and joggers and people that do yoga and other Bright Bike here. As a fitness instructor, that's a theme that we have, is that in order to have that growth, that personal growth, that community growth, because it's group fitness, that we get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and the benefits will come later. So I've been telling folks, share your stories. Out of some of the parts of the state, formerly known as Cane Country, and I've gone out of there. I wish we could have gotten J.D. Schulten in there. But folks up there, just coming together, just being at a park with signs out saying Democrat. They're uncomfortable with that. Down in the southwest part of the state, I think this was probably 2 weekends ago, there were probably maybe about 20 Democrats that had come out. And one of our older Iowans, she came up to me, because when I was speaking, there was a guy that had driven slowly through the park, through that, and he looked at her and shook his fist and said, Trump all the way, Trump all the way. So it rattled her. So but there she was. She didn't turn around and leave. She stayed for the rest of the event. So get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Start thinking of those stories and how you were affected, how we all are affected, friends, family, neighbors, by the bad legislation, bad laws that are coming forward. We're in a spot now where Governor Reynolds is just, she's auditioning for something through Fox News instead of making sure that we've got, the ability for parents to express their concern, for teachers, faculty, staff to express their concern about keeping each other safe. And that's one of the things too. I noticed, I think in today's Des Moines Register, maybe yesterday, in questioning, part of the a press release that we had put out about mask bans. Her staff had said, well, the governor has said that Iowans, they know how to keep themselves safe and they know how to keep their families safe. Well, that's the difference with Democrats. We do that, and we want to keep each other safe, right? Because we know that we're no more fortunate than the least fortunate among us, and that's what we do as Democrats. And we are going to do that. Part of getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, I applaud you all for getting together for the Phoenix Club and pulling together resources, money, and people power. If you can do a little bit more, if you can make sure you're connecting with, your county party and your county reps to the state central committee, your district, your district folks. I've heard Jennifer mentioned, the feedback in the postmortems. Well, whether it's the potluck insurgency or the Highway 30 group or the Hughes project with some of our larger donors and past electeds, a lot of similar things came about messaging and year-round organizing. Well, we've been working with some of our larger donors. We are soon to be advertising and trying to hire as a start, rather than waiting till next year for a coordinated campaign and staff. We're going to try and bring 4 organizers on, and I want them to live in the congressional district that they are going to be working with groups like you and the county parties to bring the training that's been going on from the Democratic Party to, again, I think it's great that all these different groups have been doing those and organizing themselves, because it can't just be the party alone, it can't be the individual electeds, it can't just be the caucuses. If we can get ourselves uncomfortable between now, city council, school board races this year, and next fall, we can do that. Do those things. So we've got the message about year-round organizing. It's not a new idea. It's been present in Iowa. It's starting ASAP rather than waiting for that coordinated campaign. And we've looked at some other states, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Those are some things that they ramped up a few years ago to make that type of change. And another change that they have done is in terms of messaging and how can we coordinate so that all the different partners and the party can be connecting and reaching those who are reachable. We're not talking about those who drank the Trump Kool-Aid, but those who are persuadable that have voted Democrat one way and Republican the other. We're talking with our partners in the caucuses about trying to get a communications hub to help generate that type of messaging, as well as the research. We've got to have good, up-to-date research and catch up with the century that we're in to have information that helps us, not in terms of policy, which we do have good policy, but what touches the heart? What is going to get people to vote their conscience and their heart? And they will find that it will align with their interests and not voting against their own interests. So just very glad to see that going on. Kind of a third piece, because I've talked about all the different groups that have been doing the postmortems, talked about some of our partners, but I also want to highlight and thank Leader Konfrsy and Leader Walls for working with me as chair of the party. We've had meetings. Our executive directors have been having ongoing planning and communication, just keeping each other what's going. We've been having press conferences on Thursdays to again get the message. We just recently this past week we had there had to be 15 plus representatives of the media present there. After the governor had her press conference, but we also invited the chair of the State Central Committee Disability Caucus, and we had the woman who put together the sit-in protest about masks and schools at the Capitol. It was a great addition. We got some great media about that, but our comms groups are communicating. They're getting in their meeting weekly. Again, kind of the same. What are you going to hit? What's coming up? Who's coming to the state? And we just had again a good response to that. So I'm loving that building energy. There's going to be another build of energy after we know the maps from redistricting, so people will know who's running where, that type of thing. So I just see it as a crescendo, trying to come up. But with Senator Walls, with Leader Konfrsy, and myself, I mean, if we can just be this iron triangle that all of the counties and all of the candidates can have as a foundation, if we can, and I know we'll keep us moving towards winning some elections. We don't have the governor's office, so we don't have the constant media attention, but so we don't have the big shark that can drop in on something, but we can collectively be a bunch of piranha and just start tearing the negative messages down about Democrats and about Republicans, and the positives of what Democrats can bring when you vote Democrat and support each other. So other than that, it's just a pleasure to be here with you, and both of us will take any questions that you want to ask.
Okay, bring it on. We're ready. What you got?
First of all, thank you to both of you for being road warriors, because I know you do a lot of windshield time and this is a big state to have to cross over, and I know it's uncomfortable, so thank you for doing that. You've got GPS, which is helpful.
Yeah. It got me to Old McDonald's Farm. It didn't quite get me here.
And I'm sorry. We
No, it's all
could
right.
get more specific for you.
That's answer. That's not on you.
But it's a neat farm.
I love it over there.
Yeah, right?
It's closed though, I ended up there too. It's closed, but it's fun.
So, Ross, you specifically talked about, having that infrastructure, to hold all that triangle together. I have to ask about the van. Because for those of us who are, step back.
Just gonna let Ross take this one.
The van has notoriously been our only source of names and data from the party, and it's been notoriously, incorrect so many times.
Yep.
And it makes us on the ground be unhappy with the state because the van doesn't have accurate information. So that is the background. What are you going to do to make the van better for us?
Right, absolutely. And as someone who has tried to use that in past campaigns,
Yeah,
I agree.
understand.
So I know what you're talking about. So we've had staff looking at trying to update, make some corrections, and I talked about this data research hub. That's another concept some other states have done, and LL stuff. You're down the weeds here, but you want this.
Yeah.
Part of the function of that is different progressive groups. Party will buy into that LLC, and yes, focus groups, and yes, accurate names and addresses and emails, but also trying to brainstorm and get at what I talked about instead of what people thinking about policy, but what is going to move people to vote. That's another concept, and finding out, breaking it down by different demographics, but knowing specifically with hard work, a neighborhood, and here's who tends to be in the issues that are of concern there, and hopefully the household. So that information can help feed when we're able to get it going, the communications up. So if we know here's the group of people, what is going to move them, here's how we communicate that to them to get them out there. So that's one effort at that. But message has been clearly received about van. We will keep working at van itself,
Well,
but hoping to layer some other things onto it.
When we had the joint event with the Senate Majority Fund
Yeah.
earlier this year, and they sent us the list, their list, for Linn County, and I looked at it and I was really embarrassed by some of the people who were still on the list, some of the people who were really fabulous, well-known Democrats who were dead and they were still on the list.
Yeah.
So I went through the list and sent it back and said dead, moved, divorced, whatever.
Right.
If you can connect with individual counties and have someone in each county who knows the people go through your list, I think that'll help.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
Thank you. Yeah.
thank you.
Good idea. All right, I've got one. So it feels to me like if we're going to do more winning across the state, there's two things that we need to do. In the past, if a majority party was doing things that were kind of crazy and unacceptable to those in the middle, then eventually the tide would turn to the other side. So first part of this question is how can we do a better job of holding the Republicans' feet to the fire on issues that don't appeal to the people, the independents in the middle, that they're getting past. And then the flip side of that is it also feels like rather than just criticizing them, we need to stand for 2 or 3 things really clearly. Not just that they're doing something bad, but here's what we believe. What are those 2 or 3 things?
So I can say, we have to get the middle, we have to get our base energized at the same time, and that's not an easy thing to do, right? Because Democrats who are nice, good, strong, solid left Democrats and the center don't always agree on things. So we've got to find and remind people of the issues that are universal and that people do want, and then call it the lies. So we have to be more aggressive about calling out the lies. We have to be more aggressive about calling them on it and reminding them that they don't stand for the majority of Iowans. I mean, this idea of a universal mask mandate, 67% of people believe that mask mandates should be left to school boards and school districts. And the Republicans just did what they want anyway. Vaccinations, all of these things, plus regular everyday lives or issues of, you know, a woman's right to make her own healthcare decisions, access to firearms and background checks and common sense gun reform. All of those things, the majority are with us. We just need to point out the extreme things they're doing over here. At the same time, to your second part of your question, which was about how we find something that we're for. An example I would give is, and this is in the weeds, but it's one that I want to replicate for next session on a broader scale. We did a 21 bill COVID package at the beginning of last legislative session that focused on all the things we would do to fix the crisis in the state. Money for small businesses, you know, additional incentives for vaccination and masking and ways to get better, ways to get out of this economically and physically, and schools and all of this. And I don't know if you know this, but they don't take a single bill we introduce, right? So any bill we introduce never gets a subcommittee hearing. So it can be easy to be like, well then forget it, I'm not even gonna file. But we rode a wave early on in the session especially, where small business owners were calling and saying, I want the money that you've proposed, and we say, call Speaker Grassley, because we've introduced a bill, where is he? And so what I want to do, and this is part of what I want to have in our next caucus, is a really good conversation about what some of those 2 or 3 or 4 things are that we can agree on, and do another aggressive push to say this is who Iowa Democrats are. Also, this communications hub that Ross is talking about, that Chairman Wilburn is talking about, is a really important part of this. And I've been working on drafting a lot of memos about this, and kind of communications is my world. And one of those things is to do an overarching branding campaign in the state of Iowa that focuses on what an Iowa Democrat looks like. Because I don't know about you, but I'm not really a lot like Nancy Pelosi, but I sure do get compared to her a lot. And she's not from here, but I am, right? And so we need to redefine what an Iowa Democrat is to Iowans and stop letting them define us. So a lot of this is, we cannot do that when we're constantly doing rapid response. So I'm proposing we do an overarching brand campaign in addition to rapid response, so that we can start, because I teach this for a living. And so, you know, I know that it doesn't do nothing will grow in your brand soil, because I have a lovely farming analogy I give my students, if you don't have good, strong base of support, if you don't have a good, strong brand. So that's one of the things I want to focus on. Guess what's not cheap? Branding. Guess what's really hard to justify when you've got, give $25,000 for this campaign or give $25,000 to a branding effort? It's hard to make that choice, but it's important that we do it. So we're working on making that case too, because we have to tell a positive story about who we are and re-identify who Iowans are. The people that Chairman Wilburn's talking to in Sioux City, the 60 who showed up or whatever, those people need to be going out in the community now and saying, I'm proud of who I am, not scared. So we need to build a brand to support them so they don't have to be.
The piece that I would just quickly add to that, with that overarching theme, the flexibility for local candidates and localizing it will also come from the rapid response. Because if you're not hearing what you need to hear about, you know, something that's a rapid response, then it's not going to be a tool that you all can use, and the same for them. So it's kind of and then secondly, one of the things that I started doing during the session, and that we've been building on since we brought our new communications director, Erin Moynihan, on board, and she's a previous executive producer at KCCI TV in Des Moines, so it's very valuable to have her and the relationships. I've done more media interviews in the last month than I did the previous 4 months, because she's got those connections and can get them to come and meet with me. But she's been providing to the county chairs several sets of tools. Some is messaging, and the communication team between the caucuses and us have been providing that, putting it out. They've been reaching out, getting to. So my hope is when we get back into session, that will continue around issues, and then getting towards you know, so that you know, they're seeing not only tweets and TikTok and Snapchat, and for the folks who still use Facebook, but also letters to the editor, and yeah. So, but anyway, I just wanted to add it. So it's, again, I talked about piranhas. We want to empower all of you to have something, and so that you're not just waiting for something coming from the party, that you've got these ongoing tools and relationships to get people in the habit of being able to respond in ways that they're comfortable, but also sharing their personal story and how it connects to the issue.
I listened to both of you, and I don't mean to sound rude, but
Always a great way to start.
listen here. But I'm going to be damned rude.
Okay?
Neither of you said one or two or three things. You said something about small businesses, and it's all part of a package. Hell, after all we've been through in the last several years, and the Democrats haven't figured out what to run on, we've got health care. We've got people making a living wage. We've got the water stuff that just keeps on going. We've got infrastructure that we need taken care of. And the Democrats are trying to figure out how to message. Come on.
Well, okay, fair enough. I mean, I do think we're talking to a crowd that knows those issues are important to Democrats, so I didn't feel like we needed to hit on them, but I'm happy to anytime you want. I'll tell you that those are the things we're talking about, and that's why this research is so important. So we've got a special election down in Ankeny right now, and I was pretty sure what mattered in Ankeny. I just knew because I live not far from Ankeny. I know what people care about in Ankeny. We did a poll, not what people care about in Ankeny at all, what I thought. What they care about right now is getting their kids back to school safely and making sure that their families are healthy and making sure that they can afford a living, that they can afford a job, right? So we changed our messaging based on research. So that's why this research is so important for what we do, because we do need to make sure we're talking to what people care about. And that's what we're trying to do every day.
The piece that I would add to that, and thank you for bringing that forward, I have and we have been talking about, in fact, out in the rural areas, broadband and who gets hit hardest in terms of education, some of the rural communities and schools. But I also talked about policy versus what motivates people, because you can look at the past election and you can hear folks, some of those, again, that one year they vote R, one year they vote D, voting against their own interests. Pointing out, Representative Salmon. You've been talking to me about this being a Representative Salmon is one of the ones who brought up the mask. She was a supporter of that. Representative Konfrsy, Representative Kaufman.
Oh my goodness.
Representative
Ross
Kaufman.
owes me a beer after that.
If you're upset about it being harder to vote, he's the champion. So many, again, it's not, I'm not avoiding what you're saying, but there is a difference. There are people not voting in their own interests, and that's what research does. That's what you all connecting with them. That's what you sharing your stories to, again, to some of those no party folks, to humanize ourselves, because Republicans did a great job of scaring people the hell out of what a Democrat was. Yeah.
I just want to say, we're sitting here in Bever Park. A year ago, it looked like a bomb had gone off here.
Yeah.
It was awful. I don't know if either of you came out here.
It was a great job, yeah.
The environment has to be one of the top things. Cedar Rapids has had 2 floods and a dredge show. We're kind of ground zero for environmental movement now because of these things. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a message that goes across the state, because we're having a drought now. When we have rain, it just pours. People are afraid of the weather now.
Yeah.
It provides one of those fireworks moments, right? So when we're in a drought, you point it out.
Yeah.
And you are the epicenter. Representative State is a great leader on these issues when it comes to environmental, not just in Iowa, but nationally. And you're right, these are things we have to talk about. Clean water is one that resonates across all lines. That's why I mentioned it earlier. It's one of the things
But
that...
it's more than clean water.
It is, but
That's
we have to find that entry point for people, I think,
Okay.
and that's one that serves.
Yeah.
What do you have more about that? About the environment? Okay, you're good. Nate.
So for over 20 years, the cornerstone of our field programs and our voter turnout programs has been voting by mail, with the most recent set of changes and the logistical and timeline problems that they pose. I mean, does it still make sense for the state party and for House Democratic campaigns to put as much emphasis on voting by mail, or to just we're to retrench to satellite voting and election day voting with our plans.
So if I can speak to this first, just because we're in the middle of it. So we've got a special election on September 14th in Ankeny. It's a red seat. We can flip the seat to blue. I do believe we can. And because we won on ABRs, we won on absentee ballots last time. We won vote by mail, even though we lost pretty handily on the same day voting. Most of our races last time had higher turnout than any Democrat before, even when they lost, and higher turnout than Republicans sometimes, any Republican ever in some of these districts. So getting folks to vote isn't a problem. The problem is they've made it harder. So right now we have absentee ballot deadline on August 30th. Your absentee ballot request has to be in by August 30th, a week from Monday, for an election that's not until September 14th. We also have to let people know that if they mail their ballots in and they won't get there by Tuesday, September 14th, they won't be counted. We also can't pick up their ballots, right? So we are having to change strategy kind of on the fly, and we've got we're gonna shift completely after our mail program and our in-person canvassing program is all about GOTV the old-fashioned way, getting people to the polls. We've requested a satellite voting station. We've not yet heard back from the auditor. We think we can get one. We can only get one. And so they've tied our hands here. They saw that plan. They saw that it could work again, and they don't want it. That's why they did all this. But so we are shifting our focus, at least on this race, and we're going to see how it goes, to drives to the polls, satellite voting, early voting, but most of it's going to be driven to GOTV September 14th. So we'll see how it works, because this is a great example of a base turnout election, because special elections, only the base on each side comes out. So we're talking to Democrats only. So if anybody wants to come to Ankeny and knock doors, I understand we're following COVID protocols. You can do what you're comfortable with. I will tell you that we're only talking to Democrats. So, sometimes you don't like to knock in the suburbs because of who you have to talk to. In my neighborhoods, you're coming. Thanks, Molly. But yeah, so if anybody wants to come, you're only talking to Democrats. They're fun. They're nice. Okay. But that's what we're trying to, we're having to do it on the fly. We didn't think we'd have to do it till November with school boards, but yeah.
And just that period of time that they shrunk the absentee ballots to be turned in, if I'm not mistaken, it was around just those number of days that were shrunk. Those number of days, that was about 45% of our votes came in.
Yep.
So it's an effective tool. We just have to pivot and adjust how we get it done and educate folks.
We just do. Yeah.
Okay, so given all the big issues and the long-range planning and all of that you have to deal with.
Get to deal with.
I'm thinking about the fireworks issue and rapid response for Monday when school starts.
Yep.
And this mask issue and the fact that schools, that's a real fireworks issue.
Yeah.
So my question is, what is the Democrat and the state party? What are the leadership? What are you folks going to do as far as challenging this? Superintendents across the state are scared. We can't do anything. We can't do anything. People aren't getting together to say, we're going to fight it. We're going to push. We're going to just, bless the superintendent in Des Moines. But, we just don't have, everybody's kind of rolling over and giving up on that. And what's it going to take? And what's going to happen when our schools are closing in a month and a half? Because we've got all these really sick kids. So I guess my question is, what are you preparing and what are you doing on Monday as far as this fireworks issue and the next first month of school?
Are you going to talk about the three things we just proposed, maybe?
Well,
no, you can. I just talked a bunch.
Yeah.
They're sick of me.
Well, this, we're not. And I'm a little sleepy, so correct me when I
No, you're good. I'm sorry.
So just this past week, I mentioned the press conference, and so just collectively, we issued a challenge demanding the governor to, allow school districts, local districts to have local governance, to utilize the $95 million for testing at schools, testing and vaccination, that type of thing. And the third thing was?
It was, now I'm blanking. It was,
I'm sleepy, I'm not sure what you're
so, well, I don't have an excuse. CDC guidelines, so mass Linn school districts do it, $95 million, and, returning to daily COVID reporting instead of weekly reporting. It's a huge thing. So we called on her to do that through a press conference. I will tell you, it's emotionally difficult for me as a mom and just as a human to get these phone calls. My kids are in college where one of them is handling COVID beautifully, one of them is not. And so I've got my own concerns. But I hate these phone calls I'm getting. And a lot of I represent Des Moines schools and West Des Moines schools. And so I'm getting calls from parents, and I'm not trying to make it about me. What I'm saying is it's a very helpless feeling because we all were against this law. We all were standing up saying this is a problem. And they threw it in at the end with no public hearing, with no public input. And the governor signed it an hour later, and it was a big victory for them. And now here we are feeling the impact of that law. And so, I can't publicly stand up and tell school districts to flout the law. I don't feel, after seeing what was done to Des Moines Public Schools last session and how they were targeted, in terms of funding cuts that hurt kids, it's hard for me to say that. But I think that if districts would band together and folks would work together, there might be some power in numbers they could do. That would not be me calling on them to do that, of course. It would just be me saying, there's power in numbers.
And contacting your local school board and city council members, whether they are Democrat, Republican, I know they're not partisan, but folks know who each other is, right? It's important for them to hear from all of us, because otherwise they're only hearing from the other side. And that part of that is what motivated the Iowa City mayor and city council to issue a ban. And some of the parents and educators have been in communication with the Iowa City School Board, but thus far they've got a great platform. They've got some local support because the city did it, and so it's important for your voice to not have been heard. We'll continue to try and call it through through the media. I have not heard whether any lawsuits are going to be attempted at this point. I know that with elections, LULAC has been championing there, but you got a follow-up to that?
Yeah, I do. But do you have plans, like at the state, at the Iowa Dams, do you have plans to put out emergency emails to your county chairs, to Democrats across, and say, if you're concerned about these things, do this and this and this?
Yeah. I mean, I talked about the toolkits, the communication. Part of what we just put out went out to all the chairs. Those 3 points.
3 points.
That went out to all the chairs, and I've seen some of them, emailing, trying to get members to do that, and it's beyond frustrating. It's pissing everybody off, but that's part of the problem of being in the minority. We can't. Go ahead. If you have some other recommendations.
It's just the urgency of
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely,
That's my thing. Is that
Yes.
it just breaks your heart because none of this. Call your school board member. Doesn't matter on Sunday night when you're trying to decide whether to send your kid to school tomorrow morning, and that is heart-wrenching and horrifying. And it is, our hands are tied, and it's so frustrating. So what we have talked about a release on Monday morning or Tuesday to say to the general public saying, we really strongly urge school districts to wear masks or whatever. But it's communication to the county chairs that I know you're kind of planning on too.
Yeah.
Like maybe one-page ads in the register, or something like that that says, hey folks, wake up.
Yep. Got letters to the editor out there waiting to go. Don't have funding for a full-page ad, but it's I will promise you this. We will push as hard as we can on Monday with where we are and see what we can do pounding going forward. It's a good reminder that we need to keep hitting this drum.
Yeah.
I can't fix it Monday morning, and that's what I hate.
Yeah. That would take some type of legal action. I don't know if any school boards are, and again, it's hard because Des Moines was pummeled from it's a governor who has no problem with retribution. Right? So that's part of what some of the fear from some of the, I've talked to a few of the attorneys with some school boards, and that's part of what is stopping them from trying to either ignore the governor's efforts, but even them trying to see if they can put forward to get some type of injunction. They're all the same fear about retribution.
Really hard.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, just to add to that discussion, being on the school board, I feel all your pain.
Yeah.
We're getting phone calls, emails, every single one that I mask mandate. So it's not that school boards aren't aware, but as Russ said, there will be consequences. There will be consequences, so that's also something that has to be weighed in any step forward. But what I would encourage every single one of you to do, if you haven't done it already, is call the governor. Today, tomorrow, the next day, and the following day. It's in her hands.
Yeah, she can issue an executive order to.
And she can do that right now.
She can do it right now.
And that was our message on Thursday was, things have changed since you signed the mask mandate ban. Maybe, and Christina Bohannon introduced a bill or an amendment to the mask mandate ban that was like, for this, fine. If you want to do it for this strain. But if another one comes, can we have an option? And it was voted down on party lines. And so she could issue a proclamation right now. And that's what we asked her to do because it was the most immediate. Because I know there's been talk about a special session and other things, but the most immediate thing she could do is she could act today and enact this emergency proclamation that gives local control back to communities.
So my actual real question.
Sorry.
is, I think we're finding that a lot of local school boards and some municipalities, the Republicans have been working diligently in getting Republicans on school boards and on city council. Do we have a plan to push back against that? Are we building our
New Iowa Project work and party work.
Yeah. I briefly mentioned contest every race. They've been working to identify individuals who would be willing to run for school board, run for city council. They've been in touch with your county chairs to try and get names and to contact. And as of about 3 weeks ago, I think we started like in April, in Iowa, they'd gotten a hold of responses from about 1,300 people who would be willing to run for local office, and identified another 1,400 plus who would be willing to support them in those communities. So that's an effort. I just want to go back to, because you reminded me, I do know that the top 10 school districts, the Urban Education Network, and I know they were having a meeting conversation about this. I haven't heard, if they're going to try and pursue some type of legal action or not. I just don't know. I don't know if your attorney here would know, or was it in the meeting? Okay, so
One last question, and I'm sorry to say it's over.
Sorry, slow down.
Like you said, the 8 largest school districts just met. We have between 700 and 800 school districts in the city. If they all decided to say, we're not going to do it, you're not going to have enough paper to tell them that they can't go to hell, Ridiculous. I'm sitting here saying, why hasn't somebody thought of that?
I think they have. I think a lot of these school districts are perfectly happy not to have mask
They're
mandates.
Republican.
Yeah.
I know that. I'm just saying.
That's what's frustrating.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Collective action is what's going to help. You're right.
Let's have a round of applause for these guys. We appreciate you all coming. Thanks for your questions. Thanks to you guys. I know
Thanks.
we're a tough crowd.
I love it.
Yeah, but
I don't know. I spoke to a Rotary not too long ago,
Yeah.
so this is nothing compared to Rotary. So,
we're definitely on your team.
which is different than Rotary.
Right,
Yeah.
I bet. Well, thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you guys very
for coming,
much.
guys, and thank you all for coming in.
I have to run and let a puppy out in Des Moines who doesn't know how to stay home by himself very long, so I'm running out, but I'm the only Jennifer in the legislature, so feel free to reach out to me. It's hard to believe as a Gen Xer that I'm the only Jennifer, but I am. So feel free to reach out anytime. Thanks, everybody. Sorry.
Appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, I should have.